This session is a very quick reference so that you can refer at any point of time for your further analysis. So, what is meant by Microsoft Azure Data Factory? Azure Data Factory is a cloud ETL service. Here ETL means extract, transform and load, right? So ADF is a Azure's cloud ETL service. So this can be scale out serverless data integration and to the data transformation. So the main point is ADF is a service provided by Microsoft Windows Azure Cloud, and it is an ETL based service. So ETL means extract, transform and load. So basically ADF contains 5 key components. ADF will contain 5 key components. So first one is pipeline. What is meant by pipeline? So pipeline is a logical grouping of activities. So we will call pipeline is a logical grouping of activities. These are activities. So pipeline is like same the English meaning. If it is, this is the pipeline, and this pipeline will contain different kinds of activities. Activity 1, 2, 3, 4, so and so. So then what is meant by activities? Activities are the processing step. So if you consider this as a pipeline of ADF, this pipeline will contain set of activities. So each activity will do its own processing. So you will logically group these activities into a pipeline. So we have three different types of activities. Okay, so first one is data movement activities. Data movement. So from one source to destination, or whenever you want to move the data from one place to another location, then we will use data movement activities. So second one is data transformation activities. So third one is control activities. So if you want, you can note down. So we have different types of activities in ADF. Those we can categorize them as in 3 types. First one is data movement activities. Second one is data transformation activities. So data transformation means you want to perform some operations. You want to clean up the data, or you want to manipulate the columns, or you want to manipulate the rows. So any kind of transformation whenever you want to do, you will utilize data transformation activities. At the same way, we have control activities. So whenever you are doing any design or some program or some code, definitely we need controlling your program, right? It is like if condition, such kind of controlling mechanism. Whenever whatever we do in programming language, same thing can be applicable in ADF also. So ADF is basically UI based application. So UI based service provided by Microsoft. So that means it is like you can simply drag and drop the activities into your dashboard, and you can logically group them as a pipeline, right? So activities can be described into three types. First one is data movement activities, data transformation activities, and data control activities, right? Now, very good. Now you understood what is meant by data pipeline and what are the activities. Now, these activities, to perform something, these activities require some data set. Data, right? Basically. So we will third component is data sets. So data sets represent data structures within the data source, which simply point to or reference the data you want to use in your activities as input or output, right? So data sets represents data structures within the data source, which simply point to or reference the data you want to use in your activities, right? So if this is the pipeline, this is first activity, this activity will connect to some data set where this activity will do something on this particular data set. So this is a kind of reference. Now fourth component is linked services. Fourth component is linked services. So this linked services will do to establish a connection to the data set, you need linked services. So linked services used for two purposes. One is to represent your data store, and to represent a compute resource. So now we understood first one is pipeline, second one is activities, third one is data sets, fourth one is linked services, and fifth one is integration runtime. So these are the 5 components. So what is meant by integration runtime? Integration runtime acts like a bridge. Integration runtime acts like a bridge between activity and linked services. So integration runtime data sets. Integration runtime, this is linked service. So integration runtime acts like a bridge between activity and linked services and provides the compute environment basically. So these are the 5 key components. These are the basic idea of Azure Data Framework. So one more time I'm just going to repeat. ADF is an ETL based service provided by Microsoft Windows Azure, right? ETL means extract, transform and load. ADF contains 5 key components. First one is pipeline, second one is activity. Pipeline is logical grouping of activities. Third one is data set, on which data you want to perform. Third one is linked service, so to reference to this data set. Fifth one is integration runtime. So this is the bridge between your activity and data set. Okay. Now in ADF, basically once you created one ADF pipeline, let's imagine you created multiple ADF pipelines. 1, 2, 3. So ADF provides different kinds of triggers to run your pipeline. So basically why you design a data pipeline, ADF pipeline, to execute this, right? To execute this, to perform some operations on your data, particular data. So this can be achieved by using triggering. So that means you want to execute by some means. So we can set triggers. We in ADF we have three kinds of triggers. One is scheduled one, that means we can schedule when this pipeline need to be executed, and second one is event based. So for example, first pipeline you want to schedule at particular point of time 4 p.m. IST, and second pipeline you want to run on particular event occurs. So that means when you place one file into Azure blob, then immediately your second pipeline needs to be executed. So this kind of scenario you can achieve by using event based triggering. Third one is tumbling. Tumbling window trigger. So tumbling window trigger. This is basically you will do when you want to perform some operations on archive data. Okay, so these are the three different types of triggers you have in ADF. So okay, now we will move to integration runtime, because integration runtime is the bridge between activity and your linked services, right? So we have different kinds of integration runtime. Integration runtime. First one is by default Microsoft Azure will provide, that is Azure Integration Runtime. That means whenever you are creating one ADF, by default you will get this Azure Integration Runtime. Second one is self-hosted integration runtime. So this self-hosted integration runtime means you will install on your local system or VM. This is called self-hosted runtime. And third one is Azure SSIS integration runtime. So this runtime uses for whenever you want to lift and shift your existing SSIS package to Azure, you can use Azure integration runtime. So we have three types of integration runtimes. First one is Azure integration runtime, that is by default. Second one is Azure self-hosted integration runtime, where you will deploy into your local, install into your local machine. Third one is Azure SSIS integration runtime. So in ADF, so now just quickly we will see the architecture or the flow I will draw so that you can understand. Pipeline is activities. So pipeline is a logical grouping of activities, right? So then your data set comes into picture. So you will consume the data set, consume and produce. You will consume and produce after doing some activities action. Then this data set is linked services, will be linked to linked services. So where this data is stored, then integration runtime. So this will be linked to this one. So this activity runs on this particular integration runtime. So this is a ADF flow basically. pipeline is a logical grouping of activities. This activity will consume your data set and produce the data set. So this data set where exactly stored, that you can know by using linked services, and this activity will run on integration runtime. Okay. So now how to create ADF? Okay, how to create ADF? So ADF you can create by using, once you log into Azure portal, you can create portal.azure.com, portal.azure.com, and search for resource data factory, and then you will get create ADF. So this is one of the URL, portal.azure.com, or you can use another URL also, adf.azure.com also. So this URL also, the same way you can create ADF pipelines. So for example, now we will take one example. For example, you want to copy the list of files. Copy the list of files which are located in some place, some blob basically. Then what are the activities you want to use? So for example, we have get metadata activity. Get metadata activity. Okay, so this get metadata activity is first activity in your pipeline. Second one is you can use for each activity. So this is like controlling, right? This for each is like controlling. Then copy activity. So copy is like data movement operation, right? So in this for each, this will be copy activity will be there. So this get metadata activity, you can set the from which folder you want to refer, and what are the field list property and child items. Okay, so this is the one of the example to copy the list of files from one location to destination, some destination blob or somewhere. Okay, so as I mentioned, we have three different types of integration runtime. One is Azure by default provides Azure hosted runtime. Second one is self-hosted runtime. So how to install self-host, create environment for self-hosted environment? So the first thing is, you can in internet, Google or Bing, just search for create self-hosted runtime, and you will get the downloadable MSI file, .msi file, and just you install it, and after installing you can click on plus symbol. You will it will show one pop-up message window. Then you can add new integration runtime. So then you will get two keys basically. Once you done this, after installing and on clicking of the new integration runtime, you will get two keys. Those are the authentication keys. So these two keys you need to provide in your Azure portal. That means your pipeline will utilize this self-hosted runtime where exactly it installed in your local machine or VM by authenticating these keys. So whenever your pipeline runs, this will authenticate by using these keys, and it will run on this integration runtime. In ADF, when you want to log pipeline details, so to log pipeline details, you can use SP activity. So this is like stored procedure activities, SP's activity, by using parameters and system variables like pipeline name, pipeline name, ID, trigger type. What is a trigger? The pipeline to invoke. So you can use the details of a pipeline logging by using space activity, by using activity parameters and system variables like pipeline name, ID and trigger type. So the now one important concept is, everywhere whenever we want to deal with exceptions, to track the exception details, to capture the exception details, how to do it. So this is really important. When you are creating ADF pipeline, you should understand how you will track the exception details. So for when you are connecting two activities, when you are grouping, logically grouping, you will establish one line, right? This line, activity dependencies. So this can be below types. First it can be success, so this, after this success it will leads to this, so this can be success, or this can be failure, right? Success or failure, or completion, or skipped. So these are the activity dependencies available in current ADF version. First one is success, failure, completion, skipped. So for example, when you have one activity, and you can see two bars here. One thing will represent, if it is success, you want to execute, you want to run activity 2. Okay, on completion or success of activity 1, you want to run activity 2. But if it is failed case, then you don't want to run this activity, right? If it is until unless this completion, you don't want to run activity 2. So in that case, you can use, this will be in red color, that means it got failed. Then you can use another activity like set variable activity. So whenever this is fails activity 1, then you can utilize set activity variable activity. In this you can read as, this is AC1, for example activity 1 name as activity 1. So this got failed for some reason, and you want to track what is the failure message. So to do that, you can read AC1, this is the name of this activity, dot err dot message. So this will hold the reason for the failure of this particular activity. So on success of this activity, you will run activity 2, but on failure of this activity, you are setting the variable, some variable, ABC variable, to this value. That value will contain what is the reason of failure of this activity 1. Okay, then after calling this set variable, then you can call lookup or stored procedure activity to update somewhere into your database, or you can invoke webhook to run some logic app or something else. So on failure of this, you want to shoot a mail. So in that case, you can run webhook or some kind of activity to run the logic app. Okay, now we will see some activity types. So we have delete activity. So this activity you can utilize in for each activity to loop through the some particular item when you want to delete some file from a respective folder, kind of thing. Lookup activity. So lookup activity will return the content of a configuration file or from a table. So when lookup activity connect to data set at the rate connect select count 1 from table. Okay, so from table, so this will connecting to one table and it is returning the value count of the rows in that particular table. Then you can use if condition activity. This is another activity whether the count is 0 or not. Based on that only you want to do a copy activity. So lookup activity will be useful when you want to perform some action. It is like validation kind of stuff. So we have filter activity. So when you want to filter based on some specific value, for example based on the file extension, so which are contain txt files, those files only you want to retrieve into your data pipeline, adf pipeline. So you can use, first what you will do, you will use get metadata activity. This is another activity, get metadata activity. This will return the all the file information, right? So after that you can use filter, apply filter activity. So you can apply condition which accepts two parameters. Basically you can apply filter, use filter activity, and you can apply some condition which accepts two parameters. And you have script activity also. Script activity. So script activity, if you are well aware of SSIS packages, there also we have script activity, but in that script activity SSIS package you can run C# code also, basically .NET. But in as of now in current version of ADF, you can only purely execute SQL statements or Oracle or Azure SQL database, basically. So you can utilize any statements on DB, SQL, Oracle or Azure SQL. As of now there is no support for C#. So we have another activity like wait activity. So wait activity. So it will pause the execution of your pipeline, for some seconds. So that seconds you will define in wait activity. So you want to wait for some time in between your pipeline execution after running activity 1. You want some delay. So then you can use utility wait activity here. And we have until activity. So until activity will wait until some variable becomes false. Okay. For example, you want to wait for some time until some value set to false. So you are waiting for until wait. This is one activity, this is another activity, and you are looking up some table or file location, and if condition. So based on this if condition you will set variable, another activity. So this variable comes here. So this variable until it becomes false, you are keep on looping through, you are waiting for some particular point of time until this becomes false. Okay. So until wait lookup, you are waiting when you are verifying some folder or table based on using if condition, then you are setting the variable, then based on the false or true it will until activity will wait. So as we used copy activities mainly for movement of the data transformation, right, basically. So while utilizing copy activity there will be many options. So in a simple way, when you are doing copy activity, you can straight away transform data from one location to another location, and at the same time when you want to copy the data from on-premise to Azure, like when you are doing some migration, right? At that point of time, select select zip enable staging. So when you are doing copy activity, there will be one checkbox, enable staging checkbox. So whenever you tick mark this, when you are choosing this enable staging option, that means from your on-prem database, the data will pull it to some blob storage, and here it will be in zip folder before moving to destination. So enable staging will improve the performance of copy activity by making the using of zip in a blob storage. So before copying directly into destination, it will get the data and it will create zip folder and then unzip and do the process. So we have many different kinds of activities. Get metadata activity will give the size last modified exists, and wait activity will runs based on seconds. Lookup activity can return the result of executing a query or stored procedure, right? We have different kinds of activity, and validation activity in a pipeline to ensure the pipeline only continues execution once it has validated the attached dataset reference exists or not. So this is another activity, validation activity. So before performing some operation, you want to make sure whether that data set itself exists, reference exists or not. So such kind of validations you can use validation activity, right? So we have different kinds of activities based on the your usage you can utilize. Okay, now in ADF pipeline, after creating ADF pipeline, if you want to debug the pipeline before you publish into deploy into your live environment, so in that case you can do debug. So debug a pipeline, you will have in that top ribbon debug option. So for example, if we have three activities in your pipeline and you want to debug only these two, then you can tick whichever activity you want to debug. If you select this one, it will run only up to this, it will debug up to this. So you can choose the which activities in a sequential manner only. Okay, so we saw if activity is there, and for each activity is there. In the same way we have switch case also. So switch activity, basically switch activity. So switch activity will be works like add expression with parameter. If parameter satisfies, then do some action. So add case, copy or delete. Some activity you can perform. Basically this parameter can be a string. We have another activity like append variable activity. Append variable activity. This works only for an array. Okay, in as of current version, append variable activity works on array type. So in ADF pipeline you can declare variables. So all variables valid through pipeline scope. So the scope of your variables defined in pipeline is at pipeline scope. When you are declaring one variable, that will be at pipeline scope basically. Like for example, xyz array select star from emp, select star from department. So these are two items in this xyz array. So this is the name, this is the type, and these are the values, two values here. So if in this case you can parse this array by using for each activity. So for each item at the rate variables. So for each item, first item at the rate variable means first value and second value. Okay, then so while doing this for each activity, you if you want to do some concatenation of strings, you can utilize concat. These are normal string options. Those are will work in ADF also. So in previous example xyz array, if I have select star from, so without name, then you can use in for each activity item by using concat. If you want to use append some value, you can append the table name. So you can use that expression value at in pipeline itself. So when you want to have some interdependency, and for example, until unless first job 1 completes, you don't want to execute job 2 scheduling, then in this type of cases you can go for tumbling window trigger. So trigger 1 completes, trigger job trigger 2. For example, you have two triggers, trigger 1 and trigger 2. So trigger 2 will complete only after trigger 1 completes. So trigger 2 will start only after successful completion of trigger 1. So this kind of scenarios you will go for tumbling window triggering basically. So the tumbling window schedule will have some parameters. What is the trigger time, and what is the window start time, and what is the window end time. So you need to explore more if you want to utilize tumbling window trigger. Basically, whenever you want to perform an operation on archive data or historical data. So this is very useful when you are doing want to do some activity on historical data, then you can go for tumbling window, because if you are when you are mentioning historical data means the data is already in some form and it is available for you, so you can perform multiple schedulings, multiple triggers based on some window, right? Another option we have data flow. So data flow is like, we will have two types basically. One is mapping. When you want to do some transformation, then we will use mapping. This is one of the type. Another one is wrangling. So this, whenever you want to go for representation of your particular data, so this is the data flow option. Along with ADF pipeline, you will have data flow also. So data flow basically will help you to transform your data. Like if you want to clean up the data and you want to remove some set of columns or some set of rows, and you want to do some transformations basically effectively, then you will go for data flow basically. So in data flow, whenever you want to move some data from source to destination, right, then you will have source and destination, right? So here you will have one option, allow schema drift. That means, for example, in source you have initially two columns, so you built it, and if you select this option, if you added another column in source, so automatically data flow will take care of this new column also. That means allow data drifting, allow schema drift, automatically change in destination basically. So this data flow also runs under Spark job. Spark job in cluster. Spark job in cluster. So in while doing the map, you can along with the allow data, allow schema drift, allow schema drift, you have another options, skip duplicate columns, input columns, skip duplicate output columns. So these are the options you will have. And in data flow you can do a conditional split. Conditional split transformation. Conditional split transformation. So that means you want to split the source based on some matching condition. So that means like starting with rows or first name is starting with some name. So these are the only rows it will do the process. So then you will have union transformation. So these are the data flow you will mostly do the transformations. So conditional split transformation, union transformation. So union means it is same as union of multiple sources. Union of multiple sources. So conditional split and union transformation. So whenever you are doing these things, you can find different kinds of transformations. We have aggregate transformation also. So aggregate transformation means group by, basically group by some set particular column name, right? So which are the column names you need to specify. So that means automatically this aggregate transformation will take care. Then you will have another transformation, pivot. Pivot transformation, group by on which and what is the pivot key column, and what are the pivoted columns, and you can add expression also like sum of particular column name. So and same way pivot you will have unpivot also, unpivot transformation. So ungroup by, so pivot means group by, unpivot means ungroup by what is the column and pivot key column you need to specify. Okay, so this data flow will be very effective to do the transformation. Then you have flatten transformation. Flatten transformation means, for example, if you have source is JSON file, okay, and you want to transform into table type, SQL table. So JSON will look like this, right? ID1 comma some another node 2 name xyz. So this is your JSON and you want to transform into table type ID
and name. This is one node, and you can define another node also. Everything will comes here, 1 xyz 2 abc. So this flatten, flatten, flatten transformation will be useful for this kind of purpose. So when you are doing this, you need to map the columns basically when you are from source to destination. So there are we have different kinds of select transformations. So fixed means lesser than 50 columns. If you have data source or destination, it is less than 50, then go for fixed. Or rule based is greater than 50 columns. Or auto mapping. Auto mapping means it will automatically maps. Your data flow transformation will take care. So it will handle the drifting of columns, means allow schema drifting kind of option. Then you have filter transformation also. Filter transformation. In data flow, it acts like a where clause basically. Filter transformation. So we have different kinds of transformations, right? One is flatten transformation, column mapping, and filter transformation, and conditional split transformation, and there are union transformation. These are the transformations you will have. So the main thing is whenever you are doing this transformations data flow, you will have optimize based on partition. So by default, Microsoft suggests you to not to change the settings of optimization partition until unless if you want. So we will have different kinds of partitions. When you are dragging any transformations into your canvas, you can see these partitions also. But until unless if you really need, there is no need to touch this, but it is better to know what are the partitions you will have. So round robin, so it will we will use when we are not sure which column to use. So round robin, we will use when we are not sure which column to use for this partition. And hash, so based on some random hash key, this partition will work. And dynamic range, in between range, based on range, or between keys, or fixed range. So these are the partitions will be available in your data flow transformation, data flow option. So while in coming to data flow, you won't see, you can't debug data flow not like ADF pipeline, not like pipeline. So you need to enable the debug option. So you need to enable the debug option, then only you can debug the data flow. So once you create one data flow, then you can call this data flow in ADF pipeline also. We have a data flow activity. So by using that, you can call any data flow from ADF pipeline. In the same way, you can, if you are integrating Databricks and ADF pipeline, then from ADF pipeline you can call notebooks by using Databricks activity also, notebook activities also. So this is the main, we almost cover all the aspects of ADF. Now we will see finally what are the some limitations we have in ADF as of now. So the limitations, when we are talking about limitations means, okay, I forgot to mention we have another transformation, that is Parquet transformation. So this is like Apache, we will have different Parquet files, right? So you need to open this Parquet file. You need Apache Parquet Viewer. So these Parquet files are very useful while doing the transformations basically. So this will stores the data in rows and columns manner. So you can use Parquet transformation when you want to utilize, you want to perform some transformations on Parquet. Okay, now coming to limitations, if you are considering lookup activity, right? Lookup activity has some limitations of 5000 rows only. Okay, this is one of the limitation. And in while building your ADF pipeline, you are creating ADF pipeline, you should make sure you are not crossing 40 activities. So there is a limited activities you can add, that is 40 as of now. And when you are doing for each loop, right, if you for each activity, if you enable parallelism, degree of parallelism, that means threads, how many threads it need to be run. So in this for each loop, if you are using variables, this may won't work well. So this variable, when you are setting, right, it may override. So whenever you are doing this, you need to take care of this. And nested for each won't work in ADF. Nested for each, that means in one for each, another for each, or nested if conditions won't work. Nested switch won't work. So these are the some limitations. And by, as I explained, exception handling also not straightforward, you need to take care of basically. So linked service with self-hosted integration runtime is not supported. So linked service with self-hosted integration runtime won't supported. You need to be very careful. And nested for each won't support. So whenever after creating your data flow transformation, you need to take care of fine-tuning the data transformation. So just see whether partitioning can you applicable on source or sink. So source, sink means destination basically. In transformation data flow, whenever you are uh, mentioning sink means it is like the destination. So can you apply any partition? Basically 128 MB data is the partition. Better to leave this partition until unless if you need. So in data transformation, better to not use for each loops, and better to use Parquet files. It will be more proper, recommended. And we have, while doing the data transformation, we have three different kinds of logging. You need to choose logging. First one is basic, second one is none, and third one is verbose. So these are the three logging options. So basic means it will all the read write options it will log. None means very less, and verbose means logs all the info basically. So you need to choose wisely which logging option you required. And while you are creating a complex data flow, better to divide it into multiple. Then you can pipeline in ADF also, you can integrate these ones. So this is overall ADF quick reference. So now you can, this is end of the your ADF quick reference. So whenever you are doing, you need to explore more based on your requirement.